Hey guys, welcome back to the Spence Business Podcast. Today I have a very special guest. But before I jump into that, if you guys like the content I'm putting out, the people I'm interviewing, please like, subscribe, leave a review. If you can go over to Apple Podcast, and leave a review, it helps out a lot with the podcast and the people that are coming on the show. So without further ado, today's guest is David Pere. Pere, sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
He is an active duty Marine, real estate investor, and podcaster and YouTube creator. He has been on other podcasts such as the Biggerpockets and the Best Ever Real Estate Investing Show with Joe Fairless. It's great having you on the show, David.
Well, thanks for having me, Max. I appreciate this.
Awesome. So I'm actually really excited for this because I'm actually a fan of David and some of the content he's putting out. But yeah, so without further ado, so let's jump right into this. How did you actually sort of, going back to the beginning, you graduate high school, how did you sort of get into the military and why did you join the military?
Yeah, so it's kind of a couple different reasons, I guess. So, you remember senior year, everybody wants to know, what are you doing next? What's going on? What's your plan? Well, my plan was not go to school because I hated it and leave Arkansas because I thought that Arkansas sucked. That was kind of my plan. That was about as far as it went. I didn't have money to go to school and I didn't know what I wanted to study and I didn't like school. So I was like, well, this is dumb. Why would I do this? This does not fit. And I had no idea what that looked like. Like I had to, as a boy, everybody's always like, oh, I'm going to be a firefighter. And then I just happened to be, it's funny, I was homeschooled most of my time through high school, but there was one semester that I went to public school because I wanted to play football. And in that semester, I, of course, ran into all the military recruiters and I talked to them all. And I just happened to like the Marine Corps one the most. So on my 18th birthday, I was like, sign this paperwork and I'm leaving for free. I'm getting paid to leave. And so that was it, man. It wasn't really much more thought out than that. I was like, I'll do 4 years and then, then I'll know what I want to study and I'll get to go to school for free. And then 12 and a half years later, not left yet. So,
So pretty much you got in and you just fell in love with the career of being in the military and all that it has to offer. So when did sort of real estate sort of pique your interest? Like how long were you into the Marines when you sort of realized that like, I want to get into real estate or some other type of business to, add some extra income to your, bottom line pretty much?
in 2015, so I'd been in 6.5, 7 years. A buddy of mine handed me the infamous Rich Dad Poor Dad book. He was actually trying to get me into Amway to like sell products through multi-level marketing or whatever. And which I signed up for a month or two. And then I was like, this ain't it. But I remember telling him I didn't like to read. And so he pulled out the CD of the book and was like, well, you drive a lot on recruiting duty. You're always in your car. So just take this disc and freaking listen to it while you're driving. I'm like, okay, well, he called my bluff. So fine, I'll listen to it, just to prove him wrong or just to shut him up or whatever. And yeah, man, I mean, within 3 months of listening to that, I'd bought a duplex, lived in one side, rented the other, the house hack, I'd started listening to a whole bunch of books. And then it really just grew from there. Like, at that time, I had a negative net worth when I bought that first house. In fact, the only reason I was even able to buy it, well, I should have used the VA loan, but my lender talked me out of it because no one seems to understand the VA loan, which is ridiculous. It's such a great benefit to not understand. But I got talked into the FHA loan, so I needed 3.5% down. And just ironically, around the same time I was looking for a house, someone decided to park on top of my Harley. And the way that worked out, the guy who was drunk and parked on top of my Harley just paid me with a check under the table. And then I sold the rest of the bike to Harley and I made more than I would have made selling the bike. And it was enough for the down payment. And I was like, well, this is a sign. Let's do it. And that was it. Like if it hadn't been for that money from the motorcycle getting totaled, I wouldn't have had money to buy the house. Right. So definitely was not in a financial position to get started. I just kind of fell into it, I guess.
Yeah. And that's crazy how life works in like these fluky little ways that, you read the book, you're already in the mindset of doing that. Because any other time that would have happened, you probably would have, got the check and probably spent it on something else or, put it towards something else. Right. But having that book and then, right afterwards getting that, and then it just all sort of aligns is what I find really interesting about life. It's like these little things that, can change the trajectory of your life forever. So yeah, okay. So you jump right in with a duplex, not even like was the first property a duplex?
Yep.
Okay,
yeah,
awesome.
I lived in one half, rented the other.
Yeah. And so you pretty much house hacked into that one.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, did you have like any like bringing it back to, let's say, somebody who's got their first job, or let's say they're not in a financial position, or they just have, maybe 10K, or they got like, they saved up a little bit of money, they got a little bit of money to invest, but they're a little bit fearful because, that's all the money they have, and they, like they're not too sure because they're, you know, they don't know what's going to happen if they throw all this money into a duplex. Is it going to, like, maybe they have people telling them that, the real estate market's going to go bad and stuff, and they're going to lose all their money. So like, how did you sort of overcome that fear?
But I think that's why I love house hacking so much. It's so easy to get past that fear. And granted, I'm kind of the jerk who like jump out of an airplane, find my parachute later. So uh, that's kind of my personality. So I don't know that it would have stopped me. But I think the house hack is the greatest way to get past that fear for a couple of reasons. One, you've got to pay to live somewhere anyway, right? Like you're either paying to live in an apartment, or you're paying to live in a house, or you're paying to own a house, or like of those three scenarios, if the paying to own the house can also be more affordable than the others, it's kind of a no-brainer. So for me, this was in Missouri at the time, so the rent I was paying for a 2-bed, 1-bath was like $550 a month. Well, my mortgage payment for a duplex where both sides were 2-bed, 1-bath was $615. So worst case scenario, I was going to be out $65 a month, right? And then the other side was rented for $425 when I bought the place. So I'm not going to do the math in public, but I was saving money. It was like $150, right? So I was saving like $300 or $400 a month to live in this thing, minus expenses. Even with expenses, it would have been less than the apartment. And I'm paying down principal, and I'm learning this and I'm learning that. It was just easy. It was like, well, okay, I'm either forking out $1,000 to somebody that I'm never going to see again, or I'm forking out, $700, but I'm going to get some of it back, and I own the place, and I'm learning how to be a landlord. And so I think the house hack is the way to get past that, because you're going to live somewhere anyway. It's not scary. Buying a rental property for whatever reason is somewhat scary, but buying property where you're living is not, because people grow up thinking like, oh yeah, you're going to get out of school, get a job, buy a house. So like just part of a natural flow. So if you can find a way to do that where you're also saving on your living expenses, and then you can save more money to reinvest, you can learn how to be a landlord, that's huge, especially because once you move out, I mean, I moved out, my property's been paying me every year as much as I put down on it since then. So probably 5 times my original payment now. And so that absolutely makes sense. It's funny, as human beings, we talk about the fear of investing, right? The iPhone 12 is coming out, and I guarantee we all know a ton of people who are buying the iPhone 12. It's $1,000 phone, but they wouldn't put $1,000 in the stock market because they might lose that money. But they'll put $1,000 in a phone where they're guaranteed to lose that money. Like, it's kind of an interesting piece of human psychology. So I think the answer for me was just knowing that, like, yeah, it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but this makes sense. It's going to save me money every month.
Oh, okay, okay. And another fear people might have is like, the property management side. From when you moved into there, did you have problems with property management or anything like that? It's it just comes down to the unknown of people, getting a lot in their head of thinking like, oh, like it could go sideways. I'm gonna have to deal with like, the toilet, or if I have like a bad tenant and like noise and all this sort of type of stuff. Like, how did that sort of go for you when you first got there and you started managing the problem, managing pretty much the place you were living?
Yeah, I think my biggest regret with starting out was that I actually tried to manage the property for a little while. I hired a property manager when I moved out of state about 5 months, 6 months later, because I got orders. I had to hire a property manager. That was the single greatest thing that I could have ever done for a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't worry about your property all day long. Like when you're in charge of your property, you're worrying about it all the time. But when you're paying someone to deal with it, you're just like, okay, like they'll contact me if there's a problem. And number two, you don't have to deal with freaking tenants, right? Like my biggest regret living in that house was that the tenants had my cell phone number. So even after I hired the property manager, they would text me about things or text me about what the property manager is doing. And I'm like, I don't want, like, I didn't hire a property manager so I could keep talking to you. Leave me alone. So since then, I have hired property manager for everything, everywhere, and I don't think I'll ever self manage. It's not worth the 7 to 10% that you're saving in my, like, personally. I mean, there are people who love that, right? There are people whose personality type allows them to manage properties and enjoy that. I am not that personality. I don't want to deal with people's like problems that are super trivial in the middle of the night. As far as dealing with property management when I moved in, though, I mean, I inherited a tenant that was decent. And so I basically just like left them alone on their lease and collected their rent. It was fairly painless. But, when you take over tenants that are not so wonderful, there's often a little bit more of a turmoil in there, and sometimes the answer is just get them out of the house as fast as humanly possible, and then do background checks, raise the rent, and get someone in. We just bought some properties recently that we're actually thinking we might, the one of the houses the tenant's not done so hot in, but they've lived there for a long time, and they're not really tenants that I would want to keep. So we're thinking we might just sell the house to them somehow, and then it's like, all right, problem solved. We got rid of the house, we got rid of the tenant, we made some money. uh Whatever works, because we didn't want the tenant. We didn't really want that house. We wanted the other ones in the portfolio. So I think, there's always options. It's just the easiest thing for dealing with tenants is just you have to abide by the lease. The problem people have, where this is why I am not the person to manage my properties. Uh, I'm a jerk, right? For all extensive purposes, but I don't like being that way to people. Like, I have no problem. Like, it's very easy for me to say the lease says this, so no. It's not very easy for me to tell someone that to their face, right? Like, I am kind of I don't want to say pushover, but I don't enjoy that side of, property management. So I hired someone so they can deal with it, because if the moment you let a tenant relax on any piece of a lease, they're going to run all over you. It's like a 3-year-old, give them an inch, they take a yard, give them a yard, they take a mile. Uh, Unfortunately, people enter landlordy and think that they're gonna be able to treat people like adults, and the adults will treat themselves as adults, and it's just not it. That's unfortunately not the case. Time and time and time again, I've been proven wrong that, like, people will self-sabotage themselves in situations where you're like, why would you even do that to yourself? Like, I just had an issue with a tenant recently. They're trying to buy a house, and they needed to be out by September 1st. They decided, we gave them 45 days notice, and they decided 10 days before they were supposed to be out that they wanted to buy a house. Well, that's a longer process than 10 days. Sorry. And so then they're like, well, we just need to stay until then. I'm like, no, like, my wife is moved back into Missouri. She's she's living in a barn waiting to move into that house. And so it's like, look, man, sorry, you had your notice, you got to go. Well, 2 months of court later, they now have a, not a huge judgment, but they owe us, 2 months rent and damages, and they don't want to send it because they're like, well, we want our deposit back first. It's like, okay, you're not getting, that's not how this works. You're not getting your deposit. You trashed the house. You stayed 2 months past your lease, whatever. Well, they still haven't closed on a house. They're under contract. And what baffles me is that these people don't understand, and we've explained it to them, and they would just rather stick it to us with their $2,000, and which I actually think it's hilarious. So this full adult family with like 3 kids that had every chance to do the right thing, and we're not jerks, right? Like, we extended them a little bit. We tried to work with them, but 2 months of not paying rent because you didn't want to move out when you were supposed to is kind of a little ridiculous. So at this point, this family thinks it is in their best interest to stick it to us by not paying this $2,000 or $2,200 or whatever it is. But they're going to have a credit check to qualify for the loan on their house. So they're shooting themselves in the foot for having a judgment against them that they're not willing to pay. And no bank is going to be like, well, why do we want to lend to you right now when you can't even afford to pay that? But they're okay with, like, I'm kind of waiting for like the phone call in like a week that's like, you guys screwed us because, so anyway, I've been long deviation to just say, personally, I don't deal with tenants. I don't want to deal with tenants. And if you're not that personality, I wouldn't put yourself in that situation. I would hire someone, and I would hire someone based on recommendations of other people in the area, not just hire someone that's like, oh yeah, I'll manage them for you. No, hire an actual property manager who's got insurance, has a track record, has people you can do reference checks with. I get reference calls all the time from people looking to hire my property manager. Do that. Don't hire some random person who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and those are solid pieces of advice. Yeah, it's yeah, like and I've heard that quite a bit. It's like, some people, when they first get into owning a rental property, they'll be like, oh, we'll just sort of become like friends, sort of, and that never works. It like every single time I've heard that from somebody talking about that, when they said, oh yeah, well, like, we just treat them as friends, usually, yeah, maybe that works for the first couple months, but 6 months later something happens, and then it just starts building resentment against the owner and then the tenants, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And then, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
the whole reason people don't do business with family is because they don't want that. They're like, oh yeah, well, if something goes wrong, I'd feel terrible, but also, I can't tell my mom no. So why would you take your tenant and turn them into family? Like that's suicide. You're shooting yourself in the foot. Come on, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. But now I want to jump to sort of scaling up. So I've seen that I believe you've had a 40 unit building. I saw for on your YouTube, and you sort of scaled up. And how did you sort of make that transition into going from a duplex to a 40 unit building?
But it's funny. I've actually been in a lawsuit now for over a year on that 40 unit building, trying to get my down payment back because the seller did a whole lot of things that weren't supposed to be done and then did not do a whole bunch of things that were in the contract. So I actually don't own that building anymore. And that's kind of a crazy story in its own. We can dig into it a little bit, although the lawsuit's still going. So I can't give like super specifics. But to answer your question, so I went from the duplex to a 10 unit that I still own. And then I bought the 40, and then I dumped the 40. And now I'm at 20 units total personally. And then I'm a partner on 146 unit syndication. So I think for me, I kind of stumbled into it. So the 10 unit was, I was marketing for duplexes. I wasn't thinking that big. And someone called me back and was like, I don't want to sell you my duplex, but I have this. And I'm like, oh, well, that's really uncomfortable. I don't, the answer for me that I would say is that I had just surrounded myself with a few successful investors that I could say, hey, what do you think? And when all of them were like, it looks good to me, it was like, well, then why would I not go for the somewhat bigger deal that all of these guys are saying looks good? Like, it doesn't make sense. I should definitely go for that deal. And so it was that. Like, if it hadn't been for them, I would have talked myself out of it. I would have had doubts, whatever. And likewise for the 40, right? The 40 was, it was 25 residential units, 15 commercial units, and like a 4-story, almost 70,000 square foot building on like I think it was like a 5-acre lot or 10-acre lot. And so it was this building that had like, the 25 residential units, but then it had a real estate brokerage. It had like a dinner theater, like a wedding venue, big building. And, it was a little nerve wracking for sure, but the terms were good. And, I had a decent partner and I had a solid team, my agent, my property manager, whatever. I mean, really that deal would have been like, that would have been the deal that would have instantly made me financially free had it not been for the fact that there were things in the contract that just did not get done. It was like 4 months into the deal and I'm like, bro, you were supposed to replace the roof 3 months in, or you owed me $100,000. I don't have the $100,000 and I've got a roof that is dripping on people in the wedding venue. So this isn't going to work. You either need to give me the money or the roof. Oh yeah, I'm going to get you the roof. No, that's not how, like, you owed me this a month ago. I need it now. Oh yeah, I'll get it to you. And it was just kind of things like that. And I finally was like, you know what, I was buying it on a lease option. So it wasn't like my mortgage yet. Right. So I was having to work with this guy till I could qualify for the loan 2 months or 2 years later or whatever. It was really sweet terms, but I just realized it wasn't going to work. Like, this guy had no interest in actually doing what he was supposed to do. And after 4 or 5 months of that, I was like, yeah, okay, well, let me just get my down payment back. And here we are now in a big lawsuit. So anyway, I hope that answers some of the scaling questions. I mean, for me, the biggest thing I can say for anyone who's thinking about getting bigger is surround yourself with people who've done what you want to do, because when you run into that fear, bounce the idea off them. Don't bounce the freaking idea off your mom. Don't bounce the idea off somebody who has one rental. Don't bounce the idea off your, whatever. Like, I mean, obviously, like, tell your significant other and tell people about it, but don't ask for advice unless they've done it, right? Like, the people I was asking about whether or not I should buy the 10 unit had 100 doors or more. So, they know what they have the answer, right? If I'd been asking people who'd done one, they would have been scared too. Or they would have tried it's like the crabs in a bucket thing. People will pull you back down to their level, because if you succeed, then it's almost like people take it personally. Sometimes people take it like, oh, well,
People get jealous.
I couldn't do that, So don't ask them for advice. Ask people who've done that.
Yeah, and that's that's a huge piece of advice. And I actually had another guy on my podcast who told the exact same thing. Was he's I'm sort of paraphrasing what he said, but he said, yeah, don't take advice from people that have never done something that you're trying to achieve. Take it from somebody who's already achieved it and where you want to go, right? But even then, you have to run that through your own internal system, because DNA wise, you're not the exact same as them,
Yep.
right? So what worked for them isn't going to 100% work for you.
Yeah,
Which I thought was a really good piece of advice. So that sort of correlates with what you're saying as well. I sort of want to jump the last sort of like 20 minutes of this podcast into sort of the mindset and mental space of how you sort of operate. So I want to talk to you about sort of how you deal with managing sleep, stress. You have a full-time job. I don't know if do you have kids right now or?
Yeah, I do. Although for the last few months they have been out of state, so I've been kind of bachelor padding it up for a little while.
Oh,
But for
okay.
the most part, I do.
So yeah, so like that's a lot of responsibility. You got a full-time job, which is eating, I don't know if it's 40 to 45 hours of your time a week. And then you have your real estate business, you have podcasts, you have YouTube, you've got kids, you got family commitments, all this sort of stuff. How do you sort of manage your time, which I find is really crazy, is like someone in your situation, how are you managing your time to be most effective and sort of executing well?
Yeah, so to answer, I mean, yeah, I'm at work from 7 to 5, 7 to 4:30 sometimes, but yeah, 7 to 5. Uh, and I don't even have my cell phone at work. Like I have to walk out of the building to use my phone. I can't access Gmail or anything. So there's really nothing I can do at work other than like if I want to sit there and write an article during lunch for a little bit, maybe. There's not really anything I can do to advance the business at work. So I definitely have a black hole of, which is why I'm actually going to be leaving the military the middle of next year to go into the reserve so that I can focus on this full time. That's part of it anyway. That's why the family moved back and everything to get ready. But so yeah, I am the epitome of somebody who has a W-2 that does not allow them a ton of free time, and that's fine. I just say that so that people understand that like excuses ain't going to get you there. A lot of us have rough jobs, right? Like I bought that 40 unit while I was like on a different island, 7,000 feet up in the mountains of Hawaii. And there are mountains in Hawaii, 7,000 feet up at a training place where I basically did it with a cell phone. Right. And it was not exactly convenient, but it was negotiable and done. So, the first thing I would say is don't allow yourself to have excuses, right? Like they don't help anything. So, I mean, they're there, right? It's there. Everyone struggles with it. I do it all the time. You just got to know that that's what they are. They're excuses. Like you're just handcuffing yourself. Like that's not going to help you. Um, so I sleep not enough, 5 to 7 hours a night, probably on average. I wake up at 4:30 every day, 4:30 every day. And then I try to go to bed by, 8, 9, whatever. That almost never happens. But, and I basically schedule everything around those times. And so the biggest thing I would say is that you need to be able to understand. First, you need to journal every day. You need to figure out, like, do your daily plan every day so you know what you're going to do. Like, do a weekly plan so you know what your biggest things you need to do that week are. And then every day, do a daily plan so you know when you're going to do those things. Otherwise, you're never going to stay on track. You're going to get, shiny object syndrome. You'll be all over the place. And then time blocking and batching. So doing multiple things at once. For example, last night I filmed 2 podcasts back to back. So instead of having to set up all the recording stuff, twice I set it up, filmed a podcast, hit end, logged onto the other podcast, recorded that podcast, hit end. And then I left everything set up, went to bed, woke up, and now it's 6:30 in the morning here. We're filming a podcast, and then I'm going to go to work. And so this is a little bit crazy. I usually don't do 3 or 4, more than 3 podcasts within a 24-hour period, but it does happen. I mean, I think the weirdest I've ever done was I did like 3 podcasts one night and then woke up at like 3:30 the next morning to try to do a podcast that was, in New York for a bigger show. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So I don't recommend that. But planning things out, batching things, if I'm going to film 1 YouTube video, I'm going to film at least 3. If I'm going to edit 1 video, I'm going to try to do 2 or 3. You're in the mode. If I'm going to, you want to be able to batch those things together. You don't make 1 phone call on a property, you make 10. You don't send 1 letter, you send 10. You don't. So it's grouping those things together is kind of the productivity thing, but knowing, like, you need to know your big plan, your big goal, and then work backwards from that. So, And then, you set on Sunday, every Sunday, I set my weekly goal, what I'm going to accomplish that week to move the needle towards that goal. And then every day I write down what I'm going to do for those things so that you're focused on it and you have it scheduled. So today I have this podcast at 7. I drive to work. I have an introduction call during that. I have a call during lunch. I work on either side of lunch, and then I get home. I have a phone call to someone an off-market deal that I'm working to see about buying their house. Half hour later, I have another Zoom call for talking about a speaking obligation. And then a half hour after that, I've got 2 hour block where I'm basically going to just upload content and edit content, and then I'll go to bed and whatever, right? Like I have this kind of crazy lifestyle, and I don't really enjoy Saturdays either. I work. But that's, I guess, kind of the setup for me, and the basics on time management is just time blocking and batching. That's the biggest thing, is knowing what you need to do and then blocking aside time to do it. And don't bring your phone into the office. Don't let yourself get distracted. Just do those things.
Yeah, and that's crazy that like how precise you are with all your time. Like, do you find do you ever get burnout or anything like that, or do you run into that? Like, how do you sort of deal with that? Like, because like sleeping, I don't know if you're one of those type of people that they can have 5 hours of sleep and they're like they're good, they can operate off that, or you need 7 or you need 6 or whatever, right? But yeah, it's crazy that you're doing all that, and that's awesome. Like that's crazy and awesome that you're managing your time so well. But I want to sort of get at is like do you have any burnout with that, and like how do you just sort of deal with that to like get back on track? Like is it like you're saying like I'm really tired, I need to take like a 2 or 3 hour nap just to reset, or like how do you sort of manage that?
Yeah, I've definitely had some burnout for sure. I mean, I've had weekends where I'm just like, oh, I got nothing. Like, and it's funny. So for those of you who get into hustle culture world, like the vibe that if you're not hustling, you're losing, which is, I don't know that that's really true, but people will buy into that hustle culture or whatever. And you'll get to this point where I got to, where you're so burnt out that you need to take time off, but the whole time you're taking time off, you're like stressing out because you're not doing anything productive, and then you're still burning yourself out. And I found that the secret for me was to physically schedule time to do not nothing, right? But to relax, to regenerate, to whatever. And so what that might look like for me is like during the summer, that might be Saturday from 2 to 3:30 in the afternoon. I am going to take a book. I'm going to leave my phone in the bedroom, whatever. I'm going to take a book. I'm going to walk over to the swimming pool, and I'm going to sit in the sun, because the sun is good for your sanity, read a book, and be completely disconnected from the world. And, that was a nonfiction book, so it was still like business related, and it still helped move the needle forward. But I'm literally just sitting at the pool, maybe watching people suntan, because, I'm a dude, and it's San Diego. So there's attractive people in bikinis, which is always a win, but trying to just do nothing. Right. But that would be an hour and a half of like focused. This is in your schedule. You're going to read this book. The reason this is in your schedule is because if you don't do this, you're going to burn out. And I found that when I put it in my schedule as like, this is your job for this reason, then you're like giving yourself permission to like, oh, okay, I'm going to relax, And so sometimes that would be, I'd schedule a 3 hour block to go watch a movie in a movie theater, or maybe it would be go rent a jet ski, but it was always scheduled. So instead of feeling like, oh man, there was something I could be doing, but I'm burnt out, so I'm going to just do this to try to relax. It was like, no, hey, at this time, no matter what, you're going to stop what you're doing. You're going to go have some freaking fun, or do nothing, or relax, or meditate, or whatever that thing is, that, get a massage. That's sometimes one of my, whatever it is. And the whole point of that is to force yourself to relax, because if you don't do that, you're going to hit a wall. And when you kind of change it up to where it's almost like it's a part of your productivity plan to schedule in time to take care of yourself, like the oh my God, you're not doing anything, you could be productive piece of your brain shuts up and lets you enjoy it. And then it actually works. And then you're able to, you come back the next day. And there's been probably one of the coolest things I've done this year is I took like a 1-day thinking trip, and I actually did another one for 2.5 days, where I literally just went to some remote 1-bedroom 100-year-old cabin up in the mountains. And I did use my phone a little bit, but for the most part, I just turned my phone off, brought a stack of books. I went hiking. I sat in the freaking hot tub. I drank a couple beers. I did, there was no TV in the place. It was literally just books, fireplace, and walk into town if I wanted to and grab a couple beers, come back, books, fireplace, bed. And so just like force, and it was really productive because you're thinking about things and you're planning and your goals and whatever, but you're not stressed. And so I think just, I mean, that super long winded, but the answer is for me is schedule time to force yourself to relax. Otherwise you'll hit that wall. And once you do, I mean, it might take you weeks to get anything productive done again. It's bad. I mean, it was a solid week or two for me at one point where I was just like a zombie around the house and I didn't get shit done.
Yeah, yeah, and I 100% agree with that, and I sort of, and I can sort of um like see that in my own life with like sleep and stuff. It's like when you go to bed or something and you start like thinking about the next day and you start stressing stuff, and it's like you start thinking about different things, and it's like no, it's like this is your time to sleep. Just go to sleep, like, deal with that stuff in the morning. This is like, it's not blocked out, like this is the time you're supposed to sleep. So it's the same thing with blocking out those times for enjoyment. It's like, okay, I'm not thinking about the business, I'm not thinking about what ifs, this, that, what I should be doing. It's just relax, switching your brain off, which I think in today's society a lot of people have trouble doing, right? Because it's, you got your phone, you got your laptop, there's the hustle culture, there's all this, and it's like, a lot of people feel, and I know myself, it's like, if you're not doing something every second, it's like, oh, you're wasting time, and it's like you're losing or something. And it's like, no, actually scheduling those times to actually, relax and just let your brain sort of like switch off and just, be calm and quiet, is actually going to help you push the needle forward. Because when you come back, you're going to be in like a purpose-driven state, and you're going to be much more proactive with going after stuff instead of doing it at like 20% or 25%. So you touched on it a bit there, and I actually saw it on your YouTube channel, was talking about the thinking trip. I want to jump into that for the next 5 to 10 minutes of just like, how did you find that? How did you find that thinking trip, and what were the benefits of it, and what was your sort of process of going through that?
Yeah, so my buddy Chris, I'm in a mastermind with some YouTubers, and my buddy Chris Winters was like, "Dude, I do this." Well, basically, he was in a hotel, and I was like, "Oh, cool. Where are you at?" And he was like, "Oh, I do this once a month. I take I go like 100 miles away. I rent a hotel room for a day or two, and I just work, and I disconnect, and I just work." Like, oh, that's a really cool idea. He's like, "Yeah, I get some of my best stuff done. I plan the whole month, and I'm ready to rock and roll." I was like, "That's a cool idea." And I had been kind of joking about like an Airbnb for, whatever for a little while. And I just thought that was a really cool idea. And he was like, "Yeah, dude, here." And he showed me this video. I think it's Dean Graciosi talking about how he does like a once a month like trip where he goes to a hotel and just, reads a bunch and whatever. And then the more I started digging into it, the more I realized like Bill Gates is notorious for this for years, right? He's taken twice a year a 1 week thinking trip. He has this little tiny cabin that he will just disappear to with like an entire bag of books as well as one-page letters from anyone in his company. So in fact, was it Xbox? It might have been Xbox, maybe not. But so I think it was Xbox that I was reading was actually created as a result of this. Like maybe not. Anyways, like anyone in the company can write him a one-page letter about their idea for something Microsoft should do, and he will read it during that thinking trip. And he literally just takes a week to completely disconnect and read a ton and read all those things and come up with ideas. And I was like, well, obviously there's something to this if Bill Gates does it religiously. So he's at least semi-intelligent. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I only took like one day. It was like a last minute thing. So I took like one night. And my biggest regret from the whole thing was that it wasn't long enough. I used my phone a little more than I wanted to, but I did a lot of focused thinking, reading, relaxing, stillness, right? I just went on a hike, left my phone and just went on like a 6 mile hike up into the mountains. And it was just wonderful. So then I, immediately turned around and booked like 2 or 3 nights as well. I guess it was 2 nights, 3 days. As soon as I got back, like, yep, I'm going to do this again. And so that was kind of how it came to be. And the whole point of it is to just spend time, disconnected, focusing on what you want to accomplish and problem solve. So go up there with 2 or 3 problems that you need to solve, and then wake up in the morning, have your coffee, sit in the sun at the window, and just put pen to paper and solve those problems. Just think through them. Spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours and just think. And you'll be amazed if you read the book Deep Work. It talks a lot about this, like just disconnecting and locking yourself in somewhere where you can focus and you kind of get into flow state and just the ideas just start going. You just write everything down. And so it's kind of putting all of those, like the principles behind stillness is the key, the principles behind deep work, and just being disconnected and thinking. Like people don't spend enough time in their thoughts these days, and they don't realize how powerful that is. And so you do that. And then for me, I'm a hiker. So, then I go and hike up in the mountains somewhere and just kind of disconnect and just focus and commune with nature. And it's like the greatest thing ever. And then eat some food, drink some beer, and go to sleep and do it all over again. And it's been wonderful. I'm going to be doing it again for sure.
Yeah, and I've actually been thinking about doing it, and I actually first saw it with I don't know if you watched a Bill Gates documentary that he had when stuff, and like he talks, like he shows it in like the documentary about what he does, and he's I don't know if this was sponsored, but he was just drinking like nonstop Coca-Cola in the video.
I mean, he's friends with Warren Buffett, and Warren
Yeah.
Buffett owns like half the company, so maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, he does the exact same thing. So I was like thinking like, well, if he does it, like you're saying, it's like there's a reason he does it, right? So yeah, and so that sort of makes me want to go do that now, because it seems like it's like an excellent time to get into like a flow state of just like going through your ideas, going through like anything that's maybe holding you back or stopping you, and sort of going over stuff, and and just understanding it at a deeper level. So I know we're coming to the end here. Before we go, is there anything else you want to add or say? And then after that, where can people find out more about you?
I think the most important thing for people to hear is to just go for it, especially because your audience is tailored more towards younger individuals, right?
Yeah.
So if you're 20 and you just completely fall on your face and fail, like you've got 10 years to fix that and try again and still be ahead of most people. I mean, I didn't know when I was 20, I had just gotten out of Afghanistan and I blew all my money on a 20-something-year-old truck, a Harley, a rifle, and a whole bunch of alcohol. And of those things, the only thing I have left is the rifle, and it's not even allowed to be in the state that I live in right now. Oh, I bought a tattoo. Yeah, so I got that too. Blew my money on some stupid stuff. So if you were to try to build a business and fail, like you're learning so much more than I knew at that age, right? And so don't take like uncalculated risks, but when you're young, you can afford to fail. You can afford to take those big risks. So like go for it, right? Go big, because what's the worst that happens? You start over at 25, like, oh no, most people haven't started anything at 25. So not any worse off. You got some cool stories and a lot of knowledge. So I think taking action, right? So surround yourself with people who are doing what you want to do. Learn everything you can about whatever it is that you want to do. So if you want to get into real estate, read some books, surround yourself with successful investors, and then freaking go for it, right? Because if that property falls apart and catches on fire and you didn't have it insured or whatever the case may be, like you buy another one 5 years from now, you'll be okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. So don't take risks that'll absolutely destroy you, but take risks while you're young. I mean, it's like your 401k, right? Like I would have to put in almost 3 times as much now as I was putting in when I was 18 just to equal the returns or the output when I'm 60. So if I just put in more when I was 18, I'd never have to put another penny in because it would be doing its thing. So like the younger you can start doing anything, the more successful you're going to be. It's going to compound. It's going to take time, but it'll compound and it'll explode over time. So yeah, I would just say that, like, just take action, just do, accomplish what you want to accomplish. Go for it.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing, and I agree with that. It's like even when you're 25, you go and get a job. If you try to start 2-3 companies and you actually went through the process of actually starting it, getting customers, understanding it, that's going to be, to an employer, I believe it's going to be really, really valuable, maybe even more valuable than somebody that's just got out of university with a degree, right?
Yep.
Because you understand like actual functional business, and you've tried to get customers, you've managed people, if you have managed people, and you've time management, all that sort of stuff. So yes, thank you, thank you, David, for coming on the show. It's been amazing, speaking with you, sort of understanding your thought process, hearing your story. Where can people find out more about, your business, your podcast, and your YouTube, and if they want to sort of get into contact with you?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com or just to Google Military Millionaire. I'll pop up. I would say that. If you want to touch base with me directly, The easiest way is probably to add me on Instagram at From Military to Millionaire. I respond to messages. In fact, that's how we touch. No, LinkedIn. We touch base on LinkedIn. But yeah, I'm pretty good about responding on social media most of the time. Instagram's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. But any of those outlets, you know, you can join our Facebook group, whatever. Military Millionaire, all over the place. It'll pop up.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, guys, I highly recommend, if you made it to the end of the podcast, thank you very much. And I highly recommend that you go check out David, Military to Millionaire. He has some really good content on his YouTube channel, and also he posts a lot of really educational stuff as well. So thank you again, David, for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, brother. It's been good.